used to think patient children were just born that way, that some families had the luck of temperament, quiet mornings, kids who could sit through dinner without drama, toddlers who heard the word later without dissolving. I thought it was personality, possibly genetics, something the rest of us were missing. Then I started researching French family culture in earnest, and I found a concept so quietly embedded in daily life that most French parents couldn't name it if you asked them. They simply live it. It's called Savoir-Attendre, the art of knowing how to wait. Once I understood what it actually was, I couldn't see childhood the same way again. By the end of this, you'll have 3 specific micro-rituals: the morning pause, the conversation wait, and the dessert delay, that you can begin using tonight. Not next week, tonight. They take almost no time, they cost nothing, and the neuroscience behind them is more than 50 years deep. But I want to start with the word itself, because the word changes everything. Savoir-attendre translates literally as knowing how to wait. Not patience as a virtue, patience as a competence. That distinction matters, because one of those things is a personality trait you either have or you don't, and the other is something built in small, ordinary moments across an ordinary week. French parents don't sit down with their children and deliver lessons on waiting. No reward charts for sitting quietly, no apps counting down to dessert. The practice is so woven into French family rhythm that it's nearly invisible from inside the culture. What makes it visible from the outside is the result. Children who sit through long meals, who wait while adults finish a sentence, who don't need every small desire resolved immediately. The research explaining why this works reaches back to the late 1960s. Walter Mischel, a psychologist at Stanford University, ran a series of experiments now known as the marshmallow test. A child sat alone in a room with a single treat in front of them. A researcher explained, "If you can wait until I return, you'll receive 2 treats instead of 1. Then they left. Some children ate immediately, others waited, turning away from the treat, covering their eyes, singing softly to themselves, for the full 15 minutes. When Mischel followed these children across decades, the ones who had waited showed stronger outcomes in academic performance, social relationships, and health into adulthood. But here's what most popular retellings quietly omit. Mischel himself was emphatic on this. In later interviews, and in his own writing, the capacity to wait was not a fixed trait. It was shaped by environment, by what a child had learned to expect from the world, by the daily texture of their home. Savoir-attendre is that texture. In my first months of reading about this, I kept running into a version of French parenting that made the practice sound quite stern. Like French parents were training patience through small deprivations, withholding comfort as a form of discipline. That framing troubled me. The more carefully I read the research, the more clearly I saw it was wrong. Savoir-attendre works precisely because it unfolds inside warmth and security, inside a family life where the child trusts, in their bones, that the world will come back to them. That trust isn't assumed, it's built, and it begins earlier than you'd expect. The first practice is called la pause, and it starts in infancy. In the first weeks and months of a baby's life, French parents, guided by pediatric culture and by what writer Pamela Druckerman documented in her book, Bringing Up Bébé, after raising a child in Paris, practice a brief observational pause before responding to nighttime sounds. When a baby stirs, when a newborn fusses, the parent pauses. Not for long. 10 seconds, sometimes 20, long enough to see what the child actually needs, rather than assuming every sound demands an immediate response. The developmental reasoning is precise. Infants move through sleep cycles that naturally produce small sounds, brief stirrings, moments of mild restlessness. A parent who responds instantly to every noise can interrupt a transition the baby was navigating on their own. The pause isn't indifference. It's attention of a different kind. The attention that asks, what does this child actually need, before moving? Researchers at the University of Geneva studied early caregiving response patterns and found that infants whose caregivers introduced a brief observational pause before intervening began self-soothing earlier and showed greater tolerance for mild discomfort at 6 months of age than infants in environments where every sound was answered immediately. The effect was measurable. The input was 10 seconds. The detail that stayed with me, when I first read this, is that the infant has no awareness of the practice. There's no lesson being communicated, no concept being explained. What's being shaped is beneath the threshold of language, written into the nervous system through repetition across thousands of ordinary nights. French families have been doing this for generations without knowing the neuroscience. They knew from experience passed down through mothers and grandmothers and pediatricians that it worked. But la pause is only the beginning. There's a second practice that most discussions of savoir-attendre skip entirely, and it's the one I think does the deepest work. By the time a French child is 2 or 3 years old, a second layer of the practice has settled into daily life. It has no formal name beyond l'attente, simply the wait. But the form it takes is specific enough to teach. When a child wants to speak, and an adult is already in conversation, the child waits. They're permitted one signal, a gentle touch on the parent's hand or arm. The parent acknowledges the touch, a brief squeeze, a quiet un moment, a light press of the hand that says, "I know you're there, and I will come to you." Then the conversation continues to its natural end. Only then does the parent turn, fully and warmly, to the child. There's no scolding in this, no punishment, no shaming. The child has learned, over time, through hundreds of small repetitions, that the signal was heard, that attention is coming, and that the wait is finite and safe. A 2016 study published in Developmental Psychology followed children through the early years and found that those who were consistently and gently guided to wait in low-stakes social situations, not enforced, not punished, simply redirected, showed measurably stronger inhibitory control by age 5 than children in environments where immediate expression was always accommodated. The effect was specific to gentle redirection, not to firmness of any kind. It was the warmth of the container, the research found, not its strictness, that drove the result. Here's the question I keep returning to, and I think it's worth sitting with honestly. If patience is not a personality trait but a built capacity, what are the daily moments in your family's life that are quietly constructing it, or quietly bypassing it? Put yourself in a 3-year-old's experience for a moment. You have something urgent, something alive at the edge of your tongue. You saw a spider on the window. You want to know if it's going to rain. You have a question that feels enormous. And you learn, slowly, across hundreds of ordinary moments, that this thought will still be there in 1 minute. That the world holds it while it finishes something else. That's not frustration made to feel normal. That, over time, becomes confidence, a trust in the self. I can hold what I need to hold. The structure that makes this possible in French family life has a name. It's called le cadre, the frame, or the container. Le cadre is the invisible architecture of a child's daily life. Clear rhythms, consistent mealtimes, predictable patterns. Within the frame, children have genuine freedom to explore, to create, to be gloriously loud, to make spectacular messes. The frame doesn't restrict the play. It makes the play feel safe because the edges are known. Here's the take I want to offer plainly, knowing it may not land well with everyone. I think one of the quietest mistakes in contemporary parenting culture has been conflating warmth with immediacy. Warmth is unconditional and enduring. Immediacy is a response pattern. And a 2019 meta-analysis published in Child Development Perspectives, reviewing data from 42 separate studies on self-regulation in young children, found that the strongest single predictor of a child's capacity to regulate their own behavior and emotion was not parental warmth alone. Warmth mattered, genuinely. It was the consistency of environmental structure. Le cadre. Not more love, more rhythm. Do you feel that pull between the instinct to respond immediately and the instinct to hold the moment? I'd genuinely love to know where you land. Drop a comment. It's one of the most honest questions I've found in all of this research. The third micro-ritual is the simplest, and you can begin it tonight. In French family meals, a daily ritual, a real sitting together at a proper table, dessert comes at the end. That may sound so obvious as to be unremarkable, but watch how it works in practice. French children know, when they sit down to dinner, that something good is coming. They may even know exactly what it is: a small square of dark chocolate, a pot of plain yogurt stirred with a spoon of jam, a few sections of clementine arranged on a plate. The knowledge is present. The wanting is real, and the meal unfolds anyway, at its own unhurried pace, through courses, through conversation, through the natural rhythm of people eating together. This is called le délai du dessert, the dessert delay, and it's savoir-attendre in its most joyful form. The neurological function of this ritual is identical to what Mischel was measuring in his laboratory. The child holds a desired outcome in mind, while tolerating the discomfort of not yet having it. But unlike a clinical experiment in a bare room, this happens inside warmth. Around people the child loves. In the easy pleasure of a family table. The wait isn't a test being administered, it's simply dinner. A 2021 study from the University of Lyon examined family mealtime structure and its relationship to self-regulation in children aged 3 to 7. Families with consistent meal rituals, including a structured progression through courses, with sweet foods reserved for the end, had children who scored significantly higher on laboratory measures of delay of gratification than families with unstructured mealtime patterns. The effect held even after researchers controlled for income, education, and family size. The ritual itself was doing the work. Le délai du dessert doesn't teach patience through explanation, it teaches it through repetition and pleasure held together. The child waits, and then something good arrives. Over years, across thousands of ordinary evenings, that pattern becomes a felt understanding. Good things exist on the other side of patience, and the waiting itself, shared around a table with people who love you, is its own kind of pleasure. What strikes me, looking at all three practices together, is how modest the ask is. Nothing to purchase, no system to implement, no certification to earn. La pause asks for 10 seconds of observation before moving toward a restless infant. L'attente asks for a hand pat and the words, un moment. Le délai du dessert asks for a meal that unfolds in sequence, with dessert placed gently at its end. The practices are small because they are meant to be daily. Anything requiring more wouldn't survive the ordinary wait of a week. Savoir-Attendre isn't a method you teach your child once and then complete. It's a texture, a quality of time inside your home, a quiet insistence, repeated across thousands of small moments, that the world doesn't have to answer instantly in order to be good. That desire can be held. That something wanted isn't something lost just because it hasn't arrived yet. French parents don't explain this to their children in these terms. They don't sit down with a toddler and describe prefrontal cortex development. They pause before going to the crib. They finish the sentence. They serve the chocolate after dinner. And the research, accumulated across more than 5 decades and studied on multiple continents, tells us that those ordinary moments are quietly doing something real. They're building a child who can wait, and who, because they can wait, becomes calmer, more secure, more capable of the slow and satisfying work of a life fully inhabited. Which of these 3 practices feels most natural to try first in your own family? Leave a comment and let me know. I read every one, and the conversations here are some of the most thoughtful I've come across anywhere. If this kind of quiet, research-grounded approach to family life is what you're drawn to, the next video on this channel explores the French concept of l'autonomie, the art of allowing children to struggle productively before stepping in, and it connects to everything we explored today in ways that genuinely surprised me when I first researched it. Subscribe so you don't miss it.